Unit 731, was a covert biological warfare program operated by the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. It was led by General Shiro Ishii and disguised as a research facility. Between 200,000 and 300,000 people were killed in horrific experiments conducted under the guise of scientific advancement. The victims were mainly Chinese civilians and prisoners of war, but also included Russians, Koreans, and others. Unit 731 carried out brutal human experiments in the name of science. Here are some of the most horrific methods used. Frostbite. Prisoners were forced to submerge their hands or feet in freezing water and then left exposed to sub-zero temperatures until their limbs were completely frozen solid. To test the extent of the freezing, scientists smashed the frozen limbs with sticks or hammers. If fully frozen, the flesh would shatter like glass. In some cases, they attempted to thaw the limbs in warm water, observing how the body reacted to extreme temperature changes. The pressure chamber. Unit 731 used high-pressure chambers to study how the human body reacts to extreme atmospheric pressure. Prisoners were locked inside airtight chambers, and the pressure was slowly increased or decreased to deadly levels. As the pressure rose, victims screamed in agony as their veins burst and eyes popped out due to the intense force. In other cases, when pressure was suddenly lowered, their lungs collapsed and they suffocated. Scientists observed these horrific effects to understand how much pressure a human could endure before death. Blood loss testing. Scientists drained large amounts of blood from prisoners to determine how much they could lose before dying. Some were bled completely dry for research purposes. Unit 731 conducted many other brutal experiments. Victims were subjected to forced starvation, vivisection without anesthesia, and more. Each experiment pushed the limits of human suffering in the name of war and science. After Japan's surrender in 1945, Unit 731's crimes were covered up. The U.S. government granted immunity to its scientists in exchange for their research data. No one was held accountable. The Burke and Hare murders. Until the 1830s, the only legally available bodies for dissection by anatomists were those of executed murderers. Executed murderers being a relative rarity, many anatomists took to buying bodies from grave robbers or doing the robbing themselves. Edinburgh boarding house owner William Hare and his friend William Burke found a way to deliver fresh corpses to Edinburgh's anatomy tables without ever actually stealing a body. From 1827 to 1828, the two men smothered more than 12 lodgers at the boarding house and sold their bodies to anatomist Robert Knox. Knox apparently didn't notice, or didn't care, that the bodies his newest suppliers were bringing him were suspiciously fresh. Burke and Hare were arrested, but the authorities lacked direct evidence linking them to most of the murders. To secure a conviction, the police offered Hare a deal: full immunity in exchange for testifying against Burke. Hare accepted without hesitation. Burke was found guilty and sentenced to death on January 28, 1829. Phosgene poisoning. Phosgene is a toxic gas used during World War I and beyond in chemical warfare, and the effects of poisoning by this substance are harrowing. And this gas is invisible. It has no color, making it impossible to see. In high concentrations, it may appear as a faint white mist. Here's a more detailed explanation of the symptoms. Right after exposure, the victim appears fine, but the gas silently damages their lungs. Hours later, violent coughing begins, accompanied by intense chest pain as the lungs swell with fluid. Breathing becomes difficult, and the victim gasps for air while their skin turns blue from oxygen deprivation. As fluid fills the lungs, they cough up blood and mucus, feeling as if they are drowning. In the final moments, the lungs fail, the body goes into shock, and death follows from suffocation. Nazi twins. When the Soviet Army liberated the Auschwitz death camp 70 years ago, many of the prisoners had been killed or marched away by the retreating Nazis.
Mega kill.
But among those left were some twin children, the subject of disturbing experiments by Dr. Joseph Mengele, known as the Angel of Death. Mengele subjected twins to a series of cruel and inhumane experiments in the name of genetic research. He injected chemicals into their eyes in an attempt to change their color, often causing blindness and unbearable pain. Some twins were surgically mutilated, with limbs removed or even sewn together in an attempt to create artificial conjoined twins. Others were deliberately infected with deadly diseases like typhus or tuberculosis, with one twin left untreated as a control. Once the sick twin died, Mengele would kill the healthy one to compare their organs in a twisted form of medical research. Blood transfusions were forcibly conducted between twins, even when they had incompatible blood types, leading to severe reactions and death. Many were exposed to extreme conditions, submerged in freezing water to study hypothermia, or placed in pressure chambers until their bodies collapsed. Thousands of children suffered and died at Mengele's hands. After the war, he escaped to South America, living under false identities until his death in 1979. Project MKUltra was a secret CIA program from the 1950s to the 1970s, designed to develop mind control techniques through brutal human experiments. Led by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, it targeted prisoners, psychiatric patients, and civilians, many of whom were drugged and tortured without consent. Subjects were unknowingly given LSD, leading to paranoia, psychosis, and permanent mental damage. Others were subjected to sleep deprivation, electroshock therapy, and sensory isolation, breaking their minds in the name of science. One of the most infamous cases was Dr. Frank Olson, a government scientist who was secretly dosed with LSD. Days later, he plunged to his death from a hotel window in 1953. The CIA claimed it was suicide, but evidence suggests he was murdered to keep MKUltra's secrets buried. When the program was exposed in the 1970s, the CIA destroyed most of the records. To this day, the full extent of MKUltra remains unknown. No one was ever held accountable. The Tuskegee Study was one of the most disturbing medical experiments in U.S. history. From 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service secretly observed 600 black men in Alabama, 399 with syphilis, and 201 without, under the false promise of free health care. The infected men were never told they had syphilis. Instead, they were given placebos, like aspirin, while doctors tracked the disease's progression. Even after penicillin became the standard cure in 1947, treatment was deliberately withheld. By the time the study was exposed, at least 128 men had died, 40 spouses had been infected, and 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. Public outrage forced the study's shutdown, leading to strict ethical regulations in medical research.